Okay, so we want to find the difference. So we want to go negative 5 and 2/3 minus 1/6. We're going to start by rewriting this. Negative 5 and 2/3 minus 1/6. Now, what my preference is always is to turn this into addition form. So we see this minus a positive number here. So we're going to make this plus a negative number. So those two things are the same. So now we see that we're adding two numbers of the same sign. So we can just add them together like normal and keep the sign. When we're looking at this, again, my preference is to make it improper, but because it wants our answer as a mixed number in simplest form, we kind of need to work with that. Okay, so we're going to set this negative 5 off to the side for right now, and we need our denominators to be the same. Okay, so to make our denominators the same, we need to multiply this side by 2/2. This is going to become 4/6. Okay, now this hasn't changed anything. Negative 5 and 2/3 is the same as negative 5 and 4/6 plus negative 1/6. Okay, now again, we're not adding 4 and negative 1. We're adding negative 5 and 4/6 and negative 1/6. So the way that this works out here is this is actually going to become negative 5 and 5/6 because we have to take this 4 and add the 1. Because they're both negative, it is going to get larger. So we should see an answer of this. I'm going to probably work this out the way I normally would like to, just because for me it seems a little bit easier to understand. So let's just double check to make sure I got this right. And there we go. Now, I'm going to show how this works out if we were to make it an improper fraction. So we start with negative, need my pen, negative 5 and 2/3 plus negative 1/6, right? Our first step hasn't changed. I changed it from being minus a positive number to plus a negative number, right? So when we're looking at this, this is still the same thing. Now making this improper, 3 times 5 is going to be 15 plus 2 is 17. So I have 17/3 plus negative 1/6. Again, because now we can see it's negative 17 plus negative 1 is going to become negative 18. Oh, sorry, I need to make them the same sign first. 2/2. So we have negative 34/6 plus negative 1/6. So we end up with negative 35/6. Now we do need to simplify this. 6 goes into 35 5 times, because that would be 30, and we're left with 5 left over, so we have 5/6. And again, it is negative the whole way through. So we end up with negative 5 and 5/6. This one might be a little bit easier to understand as to why you're doing what you're doing, because you can break it out and you can see, okay, this is negative 34 plus negative 1, and so it would become negative 35. Whereas this one's a little bit harder to remember that even though this negative 5 has the negative in front of it, this 4 is still technically negative because of that negative sign. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention and being careful when you're doing problems like this.